Okay, I think we should get started since we only have 50 minutes for the session. Good day, I'm Sheryl Hendriks. I am from the University of Pretoria in South Africa, and I am a member of the science group of the UN Food Systems Summit. Today's session will focus on presenting the results of a science group analysis that was initiated by Lawrence Haddad, and that was then taken up by the science group. And we'll present a section that will explain some of the examples of how this may happen in practice. So we're delighted that you have joined us, and we look forward to a very insightful and interactive session. So let me begin first by inviting Dr. Lawrence Haddad to provide us with some openings comments. As I mentioned, this idea initiated with Lawrence, who was hearing the conversation and decided that nothing enough or concrete was being done about the issue of looking at the true cost and its implications on environment and health. So Lawrence, over to you. Thank you so much for championing, for encouraging the team, and for being available today.
Sheryl, thank you. You give me way too much credit. There's lots of people working on this issue, and I think I was getting frustrated that it wasn't coalescing. The technical issues weren't coalescing fast enough, and then we weren't developing applications of those. And I think that those are my two basic messages as we kick off this session. So thank you for inviting me. And the first is really, you know, there are lots of scientific groups working on variants of this issue, whether it's true cost, true pricing, true value, average costs, marginal costs. And what the decision makers of the world need is they need some kind of consensus, at least a consensus around some things we can agree on, and we can leave the things that we can't agree on to be resolved later on. So I think I'm looking to this group and the three other groups that are running on similar issues to really begin to come together and achieve that technical level of consensus. And while I understand that the issues are complex and very tricky issues, while I understand that the stakes are high in terms of which foods have which health and environment footprints, that's really important for lining up the losers and the winners, if you want to talk about it in such a Minitian way. But, you know, really think about what the new system is replacing. It's replacing a way of valuing and pricing and costing benefits and costs that are completely out of whack with what we want to see. It's completely set against all the health benefits and environment benefits and resilience benefits we want to see. So, you know, even something that is even probably the lowest common denominator amongst all the technical groups is going to be 80%, 100% better than the current system. So that's the first thing. So it's important to get the technicalities right, but up to a point. There's an optimal level of perfection here, and 100% perfection is not optimal. I think the second thing, I was really pleased to see on the agenda a section called applications, because I think that's what decision makers want. They want almost like an app that they can use to guide their decisions, whether they are banks, and it's great to have Barry on the call, whether they're banks, whether they're investors, whether they're consumers, you know, whoever they are, the decisions that shape our food systems by governments, consumers, businesses, the UN, those decisions need to be informed by something better than the set of prices and the set of benefit cost ratios that we have today. So I think that's the challenge. This issue has been embedded in the Secretary General statement. It's embedded in the business declaration statement, and much less importantly, I was asked by a roving social media person today in the atrium. They said, what's the one thing that you think is most transformative for food systems coming out of all the action tracks and the finance levers and the innovation levers? And I said, this: true value, true cost, measuring the benefits and the costs accurately when it comes to the things we care about. So back to you, Sheryl. And I just say we need to coalesce as quickly as possible. We need to come together. We can't have 5 different groups vying for the space. They all need to work together. Back to you, Sheryl.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, and thank you for your amazing leadership through Action Track 1 and the vision of seeing this as being a major issue in the summit. Joachim, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. You also picked up the vision of this and predicted that the work that the scientific group was doing on this topic would have an impact on the summit. And you were a hard taskmaster, but you kept us at the task of bringing together some amazing data to provide what is actually unique in terms of the partnership between Action Tracks and the scientific group. Joachim, can I invite you, please, as the chair of the scientific group, to add your comments? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Sheryl. Thank you, Sheryl, for what you have been doing, you and your colleagues. This is a mind-changing theme. The results are changing minds. And I think that's what we need. I think we all easily agree that there are indirect costs, externalities. We knew that before, but this for the first time has brought them together and even quantified them in broad terms, the externalities of food in terms of environmental and health environment. So this in itself is the big issue, and the numbers, the huge numbers are telling. The second issue is also, I think, a clear agenda item and implies marching orders for the summit and beyond, and that is true cost accounting. True cost accounting is not only needed for the food system, it's needed for everyone who claims to do green investment. And clarity on true cost accounting is needed in order to prevent greenwashing of investments, a current clear and present danger in the climate field. So true cost accounting also facilitates inclusion of the business sector, and that's very important here. It clarifies accountabilities. As accounting is supposed to do. On the third issue on pricing, there is debate, and we need that healthy debate. There are certain externalities which can be captured by pricing them, including them in markets, and that should be a desirable strategy. We want to be pro-market with this and not pro-regulatory regimes. But we need to carefully assess the transactions costs of any pricing internalization, price-based internalization. There are alternatives such as payments for ecosystem services. There are alternatives such as regulation for sustainable land use, or for regulating excessive fertilizer use. So we need to weigh these things against each other. I could go on with information, labeling, education, and the carbon price at source. I think there's also a general agreement. Whether this carbon price needs to be added on food or whether it should be at source, and how unhealthy diets should be taxed and healthy vegetables and fruits be subsidized. These are price measures, non-price measures. They are location and context specific. I think we move forward constructively by leaving that on the table, go step by step. And thank you very much for giving me the chance to what I meant to say being a very supportive speech.
Thank you so much. It definitely was supportive, and thank you for putting this perspective, particularly clarifying that this is not an anti-market session. We want to see how everybody can work together. All transition will take all stakeholders on board. So thank you so much for your wise words and for championing and encouraging us, Joachim. Thank you so much. As we move to the next session, in which Adrian will provide an overview of the scientific group's paper, you can see on your screen a list of related sessions that involve a number of partners who have already committed to or have expressed interest in being involved in the coalition that will build post the pre-summit and towards the system summit. Lawrence has also alluded to the major groups that are working on this topic, but a lot more work needs to be done, and more of this will surface after the pre-summit session, when everybody's had an opportunity to catch their breath. So if I can please hand over to Adrian de Groot Ruiz, who will present the overview of the scientific group's paper on the true cost and true price of food. And a big thank you to Adrian and the team behind this, as well as our colleague Mario Herrero, whose team helped to bring together this analysis. Over to you, Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheryl. I just want to start briefly, and I will keep it all quite brief. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out, because there's a lot of material. We want to make sure all the speakers have sufficient time. So the starting point was interest from various parts of the summit in this topic, and then there was a request to the scientific group to investigate the topic of true cost, true price. And then based on that paper, certain recommendations came out, and in particular, if it was possible, together with wider initiatives, explore a coalition, both focused on first best mechanisms for the long term, but also on what is feasible in the short term. So the work of this report was made by a very wide working group of various universities and experts around the world, bringing together both footprinting data, monetization data, and also data on diets. So there are lots of uncertainties involved, but the main message should be clear. So the starting point is what's perhaps one of the key challenges of the food system. How can we ensure that all people can afford healthy diets while staying within planetary and social boundaries? And we're quite far from that. I would like to start with two basic facts. One by also one of our colleagues in the group, Anna Herforth and Will Masters. They've done various studies showing that more than 3 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. And more than 3 billion people, and COVID has expanded that. A few weeks ago, a new article from them came out in Nature Food. At the same time, the environmental and health costs of food consumption and production is estimated to be many trillions per year. And these costs are now not factored in. So how can we make healthy and sustainable food affordable and profitable? Now, that is a big challenge. So to size the challenge, we said, well, we know how many people cannot afford healthy food, but what is then the external costs? And although there are many uncertainties, the picture emerged is that if you have around 9 trillion per year in food expenditure, the environmental costs are around 7 trillion per year. And that includes greenhouse gas emissions, according to the IPCC, nitrogen water pollution, scarce blue water use, land use, and air pollution from NH3. But then if you look at the health effects, they're also around 11 trillion in terms of mortality. So the intrinsic costs due to cardiovascular diseases of unhealthy diets, diabetes mellitus type 2, and neoplasms or cancer. And that is not including the people who don't have sufficient food at all. So it is of people who actually have sufficient food to eat. And then there's $1 trillion in purely the economic costs of this food. And then this is in line with other studies, and I hope we can ask Roy to say later more. So then the question becomes, where did the efficient market allocation of resources, the hallmark of markets, where did that go awry? If on the one hand, more than 40% of the population cannot buy healthy food, and on the other hand, we have 20 trillion of externalities per year, and the global GDP, is around 90 trillion of all products. So the reason is that many of these key benefits and costs are externalized, move outside of markets. So market prices currently do not take the full benefits into account of affordable or healthy food. If you have no income or little income, your voice won't be heard in the efficient allocation. And at the same time, market prices do not take into account the cost of unhealthy or unsustainable food. As business profits, they're based on prices. The prices of what you sell minus the price of what you buy is based on these market prices. They neither reflect the actual value businesses create or reduce to society. And the GDP of the food system, the standard economic measure, is also based on prices. It's the total output prices minus the input prices of a country. And they also don't really reflect what is the value of the food system in terms of feeding the people. It's not in the GDP, nor the cost of the food system towards nature and people. So as a result of policies and markets, you see that sustainable and healthy food is too expensive, and unsustainable and unhealthy food is too cheap. Often we provide an example of Fairtrade International, but we have them here, so I will let them take that example. So how to address these externalities and increase the value the food system creates. So the scientific group paper identified two strategies: create the right information, redefine the value of food through true cost accounting, and create the right incentives, redesign the economics of food via true pricing. So true cost accounting is a tool to measure and assess the true costs and benefits of food in a systemic way. And it's a progressing field with a diversity of approaches. And it could be integrated in national accounting like GDP, business metrics, and corporate reporting. And then it can improve decision makers of actors by providing them with a full picture of the value. And the particular appeal is that it can uncover the hidden costs and benefits, but also the hidden risks and opportunities. And governments can use it for policy and budgeting decisions, businesses to report and manage under positive and negative externalities, financial institutions for strategy, but also risk management, impact investing, and credit rating, but also farmers, they can use this information to improve their impact and also get a good return. For true pricing, it is the internalization of externalities in prices in a sustainable manner. The first part is just transparency. So enabling market players to internalize these costs and benefits by making it transparent. So on the one hand, you can use the power of markets that are so efficient to improve the sustainability and healthiness of food. And on the other hand, you can also enable consumers to make sustainable and healthy choices. Governments can then also be involved to provide external incentives, from taxation to regulation to income policy and ensuring, for example, human rights, living wages. As a result, healthy and sustainable food can become more affordable, and selling healthy, sustainable, and affordable food can become more profitable to businesses. There were a couple of recommendations. I won't mention them all. Important ones in true cost accounting: foster internationally accepted TCA principles across all applications, as Professor von Braun mentioned, educate and build capacity amongst professionals, and also provide people with the concrete tools. And then in medium term, move towards the integration of reporting and accounting. And in terms of true pricing, enable market players who want to provide that transparency by establishing an international measurement standard and a database. Also support SMEs and farmers who may not have the technological capacities that big companies have. Provide policy toolboxes for governments and create public-private partnerships to realize the SDGs with these tools by 2030, and start thinking about science-based first best mechanisms. Then a couple of things for future research, because one important item that was found, but requires more research, are what are the benefits of dietary shifts. Potentially in terms of environmental costs, the benefits are larger than the economic costs, so it could really pay to subsidize environmentally friendly food. And if we look at the global annual health of dietary shifts, even by a more moderate, more balanced diet, is around 5 trillion per year. Another one is that it is possible to reduce the cost of production. There's various case studies. This is one example from Mexico, where I was born. You see that the average price a farmer gets for parchment coffee is around $3.50, and then the externalities are around $8 to $9 to $10. So on average, in Mexico, it's around $12. That's a lot. But if you move to traditional coffee farmers, they have much lower external costs because they're organic by default. They have much less pesticides. But there, the big problem is that yields are very low. So there's large under-earning and they need a lot of land. So then by moving to, for example, climate smart agriculture, a technique developed by the FAO, a field experiment running various years showed that actually the external costs can become much, much lower. So you do not look at $12, but at $4.20. Well, these are a couple of case examples, but there's systematic study required. And finally, very briefly, what are feasible pathways? Optimally, of course, you would have optimal pricing mechanisms, but for the short term, you would like to see how can you enable businesses to manage the true value they create and have very pragmatic food policies that focus on subsidizing, so making healthy and sustainable food cheaper. And in that way, in the coming years, by 2030, ideally, is it possible to make sure that the environmental costs and the social costs are reduced, that most of the people can buy a healthy, low-cost diet, and that middle-income households can have, for the same money they spend now, they can have a fully healthy diet. So for this reason, we start on this coalition and would like to end with urgency because, well, we now have this opportunity. It's an idea that's more than 100 years old, but until very recently, we have the science technology to make it happen. So we would propose to everybody to take this opportunity in the coming 5 to 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. We know the time was short to present the details and of such an enormous study, but thank you so much. If we can transition quickly then to hearing how this theory can be put into practice in 3 contexts, one in bananas, one with a true price supermarket, and one with palm oil. So Marike de Peña, who was the chair of the Banana Network for CLAC and managing director of a banana farm and former chair of Fairtrade International. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing about your experience in making sustainable and healthy banana value chains work. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us and have also Ruiz as a producer. And as we only have 5 minutes, I'm trying to be very quick. And definitely after 25 years in fair trade, we have seen the positive impact of trade on the life of farmers, workers, and rural communities, if trade intends to do so. And I think this is very important. There's a lot of learning, as Adrian already said. We need now to scale this learning up to reach our 2030 goals. Next slide, please. So very fast, already with the true price, true costs, we did an analysis many years ago in bananas in 4 banana producing countries, Peru, Dominican Republic, Colombia, and Ecuador. And what we saw is that definitely there are external costs that are not covered by the price. We did the analysis in fair trade farms and in non-fair trade farms, and we have seen that more than 50% of the costs are definitely not covered by the price of a box, with negative consequences on wages, income, occupational health and safety, and harassment, but also on water depletion, land occupation, climate change, and pollution. In fair trade, we were able to reduce these externalities with tools like the fair trade minimum price, social standard, and premium. Having said that, we should see this in a reality of market, and market in bananas as well as in coffee. Sadly, prices are going down, 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 and with the prices going down, externalities are going up. Next, please. So this is a very short and simple description of what is happening in bananas. We have increasing damages of climate change. We have increasing existence of pests and diseases. COVID hasn't make our life more easier. And on the other side, there is a real intention through sustainability schemes to reach our 2030 goals. So there is an increasing requirement from the market and consumers with regards to social and environmental criteria. But this criteria comes also with a cost. Having said that, in a reality of low income, all these requirements end up with risks, increasing risks on human rights and environmental rights. As we already have seen in the study with regards to living income, living wage, health and safety, forced labor, and air and water pollution, and as well as climate change. So there are many challenges, but there are opportunities. Next slide, please. So what are the opportunities? There's a lot of learnings, and it's the simple solutions can really support sustainability. So it doesn't need to be very difficult, but tough decisions need to be taken. And we also need some kind of regulations. Not everything can be solved by regulations, but regulations definitely are needed if we really want to fulfill our aspirations to secure decent living, which means no hunger, no poverty, and access to basic needs, through decent work, not charity, and sustainable farming. This would really require a holistic approach and as already is proposed through this webinar, a global coalition is needed. A lot of synergies, not different initiative, but just one initiative. We need to be more transparent and public about the true value of foods, not only to achieve better prices, but also to achieve a more fair distribution of value, that in main supply chains, much value is staying in one of the supply chain parts and not enough value is reached where the food is produced. We also would need governmental, regional, and global trade organizations willing to take appropriate measures to create a safety net for farmers and workers that produce the food at the bottom of supply chains. And we need to think about floor prices. Living income and living wages are one of the social externalities that are rarely covered by prices. But also living income and living wages still are not globally adopted and accepted as being a human right, which is key if we want to tackle these rights to the upcoming human and environmental rights due diligence regulations, which could create changes in trade. Sustainability schemes are very important. Sustainability schemes are regulating in some way sustainability, but need to be a little bit more flexible. So we are more outcome based and we can met the criteria with the means we have. And finally, as Adrian already said in my last 30 seconds, we need climate adaptation, climate friendly technology, more biodiversity, crop diversification, and a real motivation towards agroecological farming. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marike, for your passionate call for working together and for creating the environment necessary for farmers and all across the value chain. Thank you. Your insight is enough to fill 50 minutes on its own. So thank you so much. Adrian, can you provide the introduction to the next case, which will be presented by video?
Sure. And it's a short video in order to provide another practical example of how the true value food can be integrated in people's daily lives. It's a short video of the first supermarket with true prices in the Netherlands called the ANZ. It produces and sells, or it sells products like fruit, vegetables, chocolate, bananas, bread for true prices since November. They were covered in Time magazine. And here consumers in that shop can see and pay the true price of the products. And the hope is that if more follow suit, then you get a healthy competitive pressure on affordable products with a true price. Can we see the video?
7 years ago, I joined the ANZ, which is an organic shop and actually means to encourage. And the ANZ was founded in 1981, and then it was one of the first shops who started selling organic products. And nowadays we will be the first shop in the world who sells true price products. And we encourage people to buy these products. Well, I think it's very important that consumers see that it works at shop level, that people can really buy true price products. And then other organic shops will follow fast, and you will see within a few years even the regular supermarket chains will follow this example.
Thank you.
Oops, apologies. We have a technical glitch. John, should we move to the next panelist while you sort out the technical side? Let's lose. Oh, sorry. Okay, good. All right. Let's move on then to Mikkel Larsen, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for DBS and the interim CEO of Climate Impact X. Please, can we invite you, Mikkel, to make your presentation? We look forward to your input. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sheryl. Hi, everybody. So for those who don't know us, DBS is one of the largest banks here in Asia. And that means that we're lending to pretty much every sector and most countries that you can think of here in Asia. And one of the things we constantly think about is what are the impacts that we make, social or environmental, in terms of when we make lending to our customers? And how do I get my head around it? We all know that there are positive and negative externalities pretty much in all industries we can think of. So how do I get a gauge of the relative size of these things here? And how can I make this a decision-friendly tool? Those are some of the things we've always been wondering about. So essentially, we did some work together with Adrian and Impact Institute to try and solve two problems. Really, what is the value, what is the impact of $1 lent to an industry, positive or negatively? And what can I do as a bank in terms of the measures that I take in terms of reducing the negative externalities and improving the positive externalities? The point here is not that you can offset these things. And as you can see on this slide here, that's never the intention. The idea is not to look at a net number, but it is to try and weigh up the positives and the negatives as a starting point into a decision that a bank inevitably will have to make. And these things will have to be contextualized to the country, to the sectors, and ideally to the individual client. So those are the challenges we're trying to wrestle with. So we did two case studies initially, one for palm oil, another one for automotive industries. So this one here is for palm oil. And the question we really asked ourselves was, if we look at the palm oil industry in Indonesia in general, what are the positive and the negative externalities that we derive at? And you will probably not be surprised here to see that palm oil, being a very productive crop, creates a lot of economic value, pays salaries, taxes, and so on. And that's real value. And it also creates jobs, which is obviously related to the first one, but has a value in and of itself. But we also know that the palm oil industry is plagued by different challenges, including in the value chain, child labor, climate change, land use problems, and so on, water scarcity. And so the next question we asked was, if we now require NDP, no pits, no deforestation policies to be implemented to those we lend to, what would be the impact? And as you see here on the right, in a sense, the positive externalities broadly remain the same, but the negative externalities are reduced significantly. You may wonder, why are they not zero? After all, this is no peat, no deforestation. They're not, because in these studies, you look all the way up and down the value chain, and some of these things are indirect consequences of lending to this. So this was the starting point for our policy setting. And if you start to think about how banks can use these things, this is complicated. And I'm under no illusion that there is 100% accuracy in this, but that's not the point. The point is that you can use this for directionally having a better conversation with your lending policies and on your lending teams, and then understand what are the levers we realistically have and which are the ones that we cannot use. And at least it is a much more meaningful, informed conversation than just starting with I think, you think. So when we took this one step forward, next slide, we were thinking, well, how can we make this practical for other people as well? And that's how the Banking for Impact Alliance came about, of which we were one of the founders, Impact Institute, of course, another, Harvard Business School, and a few banks with us, Danske Bank, UBS, and a few others, ABN AMRO. And the way we were thinking about this is, what if we could create tools that allows you to measure this either at corporate level, which is what ABN AMRO does, or we could do this sector by sector for decision-making tools, which is what we're trying to do. And so the Alliance has as one of its objectives to really make this come alive. How do we tackle the very thorny issues for banks around quantification, valuation, attribution, and aggregation? And so why does banks need something different? It's perhaps obvious from the few minutes I spent with you, but the problem, of course, is when you're a bank is that all of our impact, or almost all of our impact, is a second order effect of who we lend to. And therefore, we have to deal with the impact of customers, hundreds and thousands of customers in a number of different countries and industries. So we need a different type of tools. And we found that this Banking for Impact Alliance could help us develop that. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Meryl.
Thank you so much. Also a case that we could spend quite a lot of time on. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. There's obviously a great deal more behind it than you could possibly present in 5 minutes. So thank you so much, Michael, for your intervention. Good to see the other side of a bank looking at this perspective. So thank you so much. Adrian, can I hand over to you to moderate the panel discussion?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to have, and it's really too little time for everybody to speak. So there's a lot to say. I would like to ask Hans Brandt. He is Policy Coordinator, FAO, and Multilateral Cooperation at the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality at the Government of the Netherlands. A few questions. Hans, so how are various stakeholders applying this true value thinking in the Netherlands?
Thank you, Adrian, for inviting me, and it is a pleasure to be here. And I think that what we see at this moment is that some players in the market have started on an individual basis some kind of, well, reporting mechanism, like true cost accounting, or a true pricing mechanism, like we see in the supermarket at the outset. So sometimes we see a little difference between the direction and the strategy, but also what they are basically looking at. But all those initiatives are very valuable in trying to bring this concept closer to more transparency, but also more to something that could probably work in practice. And we commend them for that. So they give, I think, a very good notion of the expression to the notion is that current food prices do not fully reflect the real production costs, and that will be much more important when we see is that our public goods, our sustainables, we are confronted with increasing sustainability scarcities in land, water, minerals, biodiversity. So it's very interesting to look into the potential value of the concept of true cost accounting. And that could help also to integrate in a more balanced way the three pillars of sustainability: economic, social, environmental, in a new pricing and reporting and accounting mechanism. And I think that could help us to realize the SDGs and the climate and the biodiversity goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. That's a very, very clear and succinct answer. And could I now have Jen on the screen with us? Jen Yates. She is the coordinator of the True Cost Accounting Accelerator initiative started by the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. And Jen, can you tell us something about what the True Cost Accounting Accelerator is? Who is involved in that, and possibly also how could it support in this coalition?
Sure, thank you, Adrian. Well, since 2016, the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, which is a strategic alliance of philanthropic foundations working together to transform food systems, has been convening a community of practice around true cost accounting. And this group is comprised of leading TCA practitioners, many of the individuals here today, from government, academia, NGOs, philanthropy, and business, and to encourage networking, engage in deeper explorations around methodologies and applications, and identify practical tools for implementation of TCA in food systems. And, we've really looked at what was needed to overcome barriers to widespread adoption of TCA. And out of those conversations came a call to create a central hub to work across disparate TCA efforts to bring cohesion and clarity to the field and facilitate increased collaboration and enhance overall efforts. So that was how the TCA Accelerator was born and launched. That entity was launched in 2020. And since then, we have looked at three central priority areas. One around creating clarity and consensus around TCA principles and metrics and providing practical tools and guidance for decision makers. We look at identifying and promoting policy opportunities to advance TCA as an approach to solve food system challenges. And we have prioritized communications efforts that increase awareness, understanding, and prioritization of TCA as an approach among target audiences. So we've been doing this work since last year. We've started a sort of foundation laying phase of work that did some analysis and research, looking at 32 different frameworks and methodologies to start to do that work, bring cohesion and understanding about the field, trying to determine the similarities and differences among different methodologies, find out what remaining gaps and areas for growth remain. We've also done a comprehensive review of policymaking entry points, and we drafted a framing and messaging guide for TCA advocates, informed by stakeholder interviews, again, with many of the folks here today and others that are outside of this immediate field. So we are next turning to a phase where we're building awareness and understanding among policymakers, looking to create some normative principles around true cost accounting to provide guidance, transparency, and standardization. And we're looking to continue to build the intellectual and social capital for true cost accounting by engaging and deepening the community of practice in support of these goals. So, working with hundreds of participants in the community of practice, the accelerator really excels at identifying gaps and reaching out to new parties and sharing information across this network as a forum for collaboration. You asked who's involved. Our steering committee includes organizations including the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, the Impact Institute, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the Sustainable Food Trust, the Capitals Coalition, UNEP-TEEB, and the Thread Fund. And in addition to that, we have, you know, a number of organizations who are involved with our working groups, dozens of individuals from other organizations. And thanks to the support of the Global Alliance's membership, we have funding to accelerate and scale this work. So we're very excited for this moment of coming together with leaders of the UN Food System Summit, as well as other conversations with the Food System Game Changers Lab, to really take advantage of this moment to advance true cost accounting and to address all of the challenges that we are facing.
Thank you, Jen. That's great to hear, and happy that you're willing to be here. I would like to move to Roy from the Rockefeller Foundation. He has been involved in a very interesting study on the true cost of food in the US. And I was wondering, Roy, can you share more about that? Perhaps even with a single slide.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Adrian. You know, one of the wonderful things when the idea has come, the time is right for an idea, suddenly lots and lots of people are thinking about it. And we did an independent study of what the Science Council did, really in parallel, but just for the United States. And remarkably, without any really interaction, came up with some very similar conclusions, which I think tells you that, you know, if multiple studies are telling you the same thing, that's pretty exciting. For the United States, we had a team from McKinsey and many other experts help us with this over the course of about 4 or 5 months. But similar to the study Adrian showed, we've got, you know, in the US about $1.1 trillion worth of healthcare costs. Overall, food costs $1.1 trillion in the United States. That causes these costs, $1.1 trillion in human health. The environment is about 350, biodiversity 455, livelihoods about another 134 billion, and then economic, you know, mostly the subsidies. And so you've essentially got a very similar ratio where you're spending $1.1 trillion and it's causing $2.1 trillion worth of costs. We have put the technical appendix as well as the actual spreadsheet we used, you know, to Jen's point, is that we really need to share and become better as a community in terms of doing these analysis. And we really open source this. You can look at every assumption we've made. We've tried to be very conservative here. There's actually lots of costs we didn't value because we just didn't have the numbers to do that. And so that conservatively, we think this is a very conservative estimate. I'll kind of stop there, Adrian. I mean, the implications are, you know, I think many countries can do this, and there are lots of follow-on. You know, our next set of study will be around school nutrition. What is the true value of school nutrition? I don't think it's really been argued in that manner and with numbers in the United States, at least. So I'll stop there and pass it back to you.
Thank you. And I think it's a super interesting report. And as you say, the materials and the spreadsheets are to be found online. I think that's a real inspiration. I would have lots of questions for you, but I would also want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to listen to Barry. So thank you all for very much, and I hope to welcome you in follow-up sessions about this topic, and reach out to us or the speakers if you want to know more. Barry, I would like to ask, and I'm sorry, and I would like to ask everybody to stay on for the coming 5 minutes. Our final speaker is Barry Martin. After graduating in Brazil in business administration, he joined Rabobank around 30 years ago. He's now a member of the managing board, focusing on, amongst others, wholesale and sustainability. And he is also a UN Food Systems champion. And we asked Barry to briefly summarize what he've heard, but mainly provide his vision on how this approach and true value can enable transitions towards sustainable food systems.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. This is quite an important meeting, as Lawrence said, the most transformative, the most mind-changing, but most important. I do think that I don't want to repeat what we said here, but some things, as Rabobank is the world's largest and biggest food and agri financier, what did I miss and what I didn't hear? I think that was maybe what I would like to say. The thing that I really miss is to let's have a more value chain approach. The thing is that you cannot look at this food systems without looking at the whole value chain, from the producer, from the input into the consumer. And more importantly, I do think that we don't have a system, a framework today to distribute the risks, the benefits, or the negatives through a whole value chain. So you have one point in the value chain that have all the benefits and have all the risks. So in my view, when we develop this system, we should also develop legislation and the framework that we can share the risk through all the value chain. So every part of that value chain can have the benefits, but also the risk and the downside. Why that's so important? Because I think if we don't share that, we will not incentivize the right behavior. And for instance, a circularity has to be done in a very short cycle. And because we don't put that, we don't reward the whole circular economy, we most probably are missing out. And therefore, some of the very long value chains that we have today in the world, they are possible. Also, in my view, we should keep it very simple. We should start with one or two externalities that we start, so that we start working on it. So I think that's very important. The other thing is, many times I hear that it's said, well, there's not enough finance available. It's because we only look at the weakest links in the value chain, because we never, ever, as a financial institution, look at the whole value chain. We do either the buyer or the producer, but if we can share those risks so that the whole value chain is responsible for the financial result of that sale, of that financing, I think that would be a very big development. If you look at the smallholder, he usually produces without having a buyer. But if we would change that around, that we already have the whole value chain organized before we start financing, I think that would be very important. So let me also go to the next part, which I think we should be also very aware about. If we look at the new accounting, the true accounting, the true price accounting, we actually should have governments to charge tax on your true account, and not on your financial books, but on your true accounting books. And that means that the capital markets would then adapt that the bonds that we issue, the bonds that companies issue, the bonds that banks issue, they would be, the interest would not be a financial interest, but would be a true cost or true value accounting interest. Imagine that. Because if we change the accounting of all the organizations, we also can change the way we remunerate financial markets and the capital markets. So I think that's going to be, if we don't change those things, if we don't change the way we finance, if we don't change the way we fund, we don't look at the whole value chain, it's not going to work. Therefore, we are launching at Rabo supply chain finance with traceability, so that we can start working on this whole supply chain and change the risk. So I think that's where we are going. And the most important thing is, I really like the pro-market stance we have here and the really transformation. Because if we don't change the business model from pure financial to environmental, healthy, nutritious, and climate, and financial, it's not going to work. So I'm here, I'm in, I really want to contribute to this team. So I hope that as we go forward, we can really give the input as a cooperative bank. And as, in my view, the only way is, if we want to feed everybody sustainable, is that we really take all the externalities and the value of what we are doing. Thank you. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Barry, for this a short but very insightful and inspirational speech. I would like to ask Sheryl, who is the chair of the working group of the scientific group on the true cost and true price of food, to close the session for us. And thank for everybody who has stayed with us.
Thank you, everybody. 50 minutes is extremely short, and we could have spent a whole day dealing with these topics. Thank you so much to all the panelists and all the speakers who have presented ideas, examples, showed us that it's possible to change the game and to do this for a fairer, more sustainable, resilient and healthy food system in the future. We realize there's a great deal more work to do. We've only considered with the science group the health and environmental factors, but the social factors and labor issues still need to be factored into these analyses in a holistic way, because looking at it from one side is narrow-minded. We can see that we need a whole systems approach to deal with the trade-offs and understand the impact and the perhaps unintended consequences of what we think is a good policy action, but that may not turn out to be. We know that this will take an enormous change, a reset of mindsets to begin with, but of also the entire food system and the supportive infrastructure that the food system relies on. This is going to take collaborative action from every stakeholder across the system. And so the Coalition for True Value of Food aims to do that. And in the next few months before the summit, or in fact the 6 weeks before the summit, we will be trying to put a coalition together that where people can join forces and organizations can put their weight behind giving far more voice and making this a far more public issue, as Marike had indicated. So thank you so much for your participation. If you want to participate in the coalition, please reach out to us and extend your commitment to join a coalition. The shape and form of the coalition will be decided as we go forward and as we wait for more input and clarity from the leadership of the action tracks. Thank you everybody for your wonderful participation, and we look forward to being able to put this as a really weighty issue on the table for the summit. Thank you, and thank you for joining our session.